From the Foundation Studio right here on Biloxi's Back Bay, where the speckled trout and redfish are biting like you can't even imagine right now. Welcome to SuperTalk Outdoors, where we celebrate every single Monday at lunchtime the world-class outdoors of the state of Mississippi, because we are the capital of the outdoors in America. I want to thank you for joining us on the powerful SuperTalk Mississippi Radio Network, or on SuperTalk TV at C Spire TV. But you might be watching the show on YouTube or Facebook, or listening on your favorite podcast. It is November the 6th, 2023. I especially want to thank our title sponsor for SuperTalk Outdoors, the Foundation for Wildlife Fishery, Mississippi Wildlife Fisheries and Parks. They are focused on the outdoors and outdoors issues, and they are the single outdoor foundation that directly supports the Mississippi Department of Wildlife Fisheries and Parks. By the way, my views on this show are mine, not those of the foundation. You can always count on me to say what needs to be said, and I have to tell you, I say it every week, but I'm honored to be here in this position. By the way, it's interesting. If you pay attention on social media, you'll get a feel for people who understand hunting. They really kind of get it, and people who don't understand hunting, it's a real concern, because they take a very surface view toward it, and they immediately say they don't like it. And a friend of mine who recently moved to Mississippi from California, he grew up in New York City, he posted something on Facebook that really got my attention. I want to read to you what he posted, then I want to read my response to him. But he said this: there is a fella in Mississippi who's becoming my friend. In fact, I consider him a dear friend. He sent me a pic of his son next to a dead animal, celebrating that he shot his first buck. I have a strong dislike of hunting. I don't believe in killing living creatures for sport. It is a deeply held value instilled to me by my dad. I cannot celebrate this life milestone like it's an important event. I keep my Californian values to myself down there. He's talking about Mississippi. I mostly am an observer in Mississippi. I don't go around commenting every time my California sensibilities are ruffled. I experience this place on its own terms, not mine. But I honestly am not sure how to respond to this one. I'm thinking just not to say anything, just like I've never got it. Thoughts? I'm genuinely stumped. Unusual for me, as I generally feel great confidence in matters of etiquette. And here's my response. And by the way, he's a really good friend of mine. I'm hunting with my son Jordan now. Ever listened to my outdoor show? Time for a long lunch. There's a lot to teach here. It's way more than you're considering. Hunting is a tradition that is passed down through generations in many families, mine included, and it holds a significant place in our heritage. It's not merely a recreational activity for our families, but rather a way of life deeply rooted in our culture and our history. Hunting enables families to connect with nature, understand the ecosystem, and develop a deep respect for the environment and its inhabitants. The tradition is a way to bond with family members and strengthen relationships. It provides an opportunity for generations to come together, share experiences, and pass down knowledge and skills from one generation to the next. Hunting trips often involve storytelling, teaching valuable life lessons, and a respect for nature, and instilling a sense of safety and responsibility in our kids and our grandkids. Hunting in the Mississippi Delta, for me and my family, is a way to maintain balance in the ecosystems that we're responsible for. Responsible hunting practices have helped control animal populations, prevent overgrazing, and protect the overall health of the environment. We prioritize conservation efforts and work toward preserving wildlife habitats for future generations. This is huge for my family and those who share the tradition with me. And I went on to talk about how it is crucial to recognize that hunting is not about senseless killing or cruelty toward animals. Instead, it's about understanding the natural cycle of life, respecting the animals being hunted, and utilizing their resources in a sustainable way. Hunting families often emphasize ethical hunting practices such as fair chase, respecting bag limits, and ensuring humane kills. Understanding and appreciating this tradition can help respect and empathy toward those who engage in hunting as a way of life, just like your friend who sent you that picture. And I might add, I have some deer sausage for you. You will love it. It's the best you have ever eaten. It was interesting when I put this in his feed. He has a lot of friends from New York City and California, and I wondered if I would get hammered. And it was really interesting. There wasn't a negative comment from the group, to be honest with you, including my friend who said, "Thank you for the deep and thoughtful response. It gives us a lot to think about." Another one came in and talked about sustenance eating, and even as far back as the Indians. And it was a thoughtful conversation. But it reminded me the importance of, we're in this youth season now, and bow season for deer. I had the opportunity to hunt with my dear friend Travis Dunn's son, James, over the weekend. And it was just awesome sitting in that stand with him and watching as we really enjoyed the camaraderie of families getting together and laughing and telling stories together. These are life lessons. I really do see that. And it also reminds me that we should not fight amongst ourselves. I mean, listen, there's an anti-hunting trend in America. Hunters should join together. When we fight about something like whether we should breed deer and transfer deer and throughout the state, which I don't think we should do, when we fight about issues like that, the non-hunting community looks at us and they think we're crazy. Hunters should stay together. We should support the North American wildlife model that made Mississippi made us the capital of the outdoors in America, and stay together as a group. So it was an interesting conversation, and important for us to remember that there is an anti-hunting aspect to America out there, and we always have to work to do our part to help people understand this incredible heritage that we're able to take a part in. Listen, we'll shift gears now. Every week I talk about safety. I end the show talking about stay safe when you're in the outdoors. I've heard horror stories sitting in this chair of the close calls and in some cases not close calls that have taken place. I've invited my friend Chris Howard from the Mississippi Department of Rehab Services to join me. He's been a regular on this show and my other show, the Ricky Matthews Show, and I always enjoy catching up with Chris. Chris, how you doing this morning, my friend?
Man, I'm doing good, Ricky. Thanks for having me on your show. It's always awesome to talk about the services of the Department of Rehab Services, and what better time to talk than during hunting season. So
I agree, man. I agree. So you love the outdoors. You been out?
Oh, I had not. Excuse me, I had not been yet. But you were talking about being a tradition, and some of my best times was, when my youngest, he's 26 now, but when he was little and he'd sit in the deer stand with me, and when he was real little, he would sit there with coloring book and crayons, and he'd color till about dusk. And I'd say, "All right, son, we need to put those coloring books out. It's time for the deer to come out." But, just having that time with him, and when he got old enough to shoot a gun, seeing that excitement on his face when a deer came out, and it's something I wouldn't trade for anything. It's a great memory, and something that I totally agree with you. It's a tradition that families really grow up on, and it's a big part of families.
Hey, Chris, the thing I said it on the show a bunch of times, but whether we're offshore, my two sons and I are offshore, maybe my family and I are offshore, or whether we're up in the Mississippi Delta, preparing for the season or during the season, the time we spend in the woods together is just incredible. My son, my oldest son, who's a lawyer down here on the coast, he and I were hunting together this past weekend. My youngest son works in New York City, but he can't wait to get home to go hunting with us. But I thought about when I was in the woods with Jordan this weekend. Here he's an adult now, has his own family, and the cherished time that he and I get to spend together, it's unbelievable, man. It's great. I think about the time that I spent with James Dunn, and having this opportunity to laugh with him and spend time with him. I love being in the outdoors with kids, but what we're teaching them is, which is often something I said to my sons, when you're offshore, 100 miles offshore, you don't get usually a second chance. Right. If you fall from this boat and hit your head and sink to the bottom in 1,000 feet of water, I mean, you do the math on that. When you're hunting, whether it's bow hunting or going up in a stand or shooting a gun, you don't usually get a second chance. You got to put safety and responsibility first. And I've drove this in their heads since they were 4 and 5 years old. But still, what you see, even in families that have done that, Chris, sometimes they take it for granted. They take safety for granted. And all it takes is one time, doesn't it?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, Mississippi's such a great state to have hunting as long as we do, but unfortunately, the work we do see a number of instances where, individuals chose to climb a tree without a harness, or, climbed up in a stand that was good last year but didn't check it this year. There's so many things that could happen out there in the woods that, like you said, just one mishap could result in a spinal cord injury or a head injury. And, unfortunately, we see both as a result of hunting accidents.
When we come back on the other side with Chris Howard, we're going to talk a little bit more about safety, putting safety first, and we'll hear a little bit about how bad it can get. Obviously, you can lose your life, but you can also lose your ability to hunt or enjoy your life for the rest of your life, all because of one missed ladder rung. Believe me, it's that simple. We'll see you on the other side with Chris Howard from the Mississippi Department of Rehab Services. Welcome back to SuperTalk Outdoors. I have my friend Chris Howard from the Mississippi Department of Rehabilitation Services with us, and we're talking about hunter safety. Chris, let me. I think I may have mentioned this to you last year, but I was mentioning it to a group of friends of mine this past weekend when we were up in the Delta doing a lot of last minute stuff prior to the season started. Incidentally, right now, I would say 90% of our food plots haven't even germinated. It's brown, absolutely brown. I think a lot of people tell the same story. We have a couple of places where we used a drill, and we got a rain after we did the drill, and some of that came up, and it's holding its own, I think, because we drilled and it's down below the surface. I think maybe the morning dew's helping it stay alive. Got some rain forecasted toward the end of the week and maybe into next week, and let's hope that holds, because man, it's going to be weird starting the season this year with brown food plots. Very strange. Very strange. But I was telling the story of I got a note from a guy. I'll shorten it up real quick. He shot a buck, went into the woods to find it. He found it, but just before he found it, he reloaded his gun.
Yeah.
Okay. And he put his safety on. Okay. But when he saw the buck, he took his safety off. And then as he got closer, he realized the buck is dead, but he forgot to put his safety back on. So he puts the gun on his shoulder, and then he walks a good long ways back to his truck. As he's taking his gun off of his shoulder, he just barely brushes the way he describes it, literally barely touched the trigger, and the gun went off. And it went off into the woods. He was by himself. There was nobody else with him. And it shocked him. This is the guy who'd been around hunting his entire life. And it just shows you how in the moment, and that I can see how that could happen. In the moment, the excitement of killing the buck, you reload your gun, you forgot to unload it, you forgot to put it back on safety, and the gun goes off. It's just a miracle somebody wasn't standing next to him.
Right.
But Chris, unfortunately, whether it's that story or whether it's just getting sloppy going up a ladder, or maybe it's a wooden ladder that hasn't been checked properly. I mean, there's 100 different scenarios. Unfortunately, you hear this all the time of experienced hunters who just dropped their safety guard and suddenly they have a life-changing event.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Preparation is so important because, I've even had instances where, wasps, we kill more wasps in the fall, trying to clean these deer stands out, and just taking the time to, like you said, check the ladders, check the stands, get up there and make sure there's no wasp or squirrel nests or anything like that, because these stands, you're climbing 10, 12, 15, maybe 20 feet in the air, and a wasp comes out and hits you, or a squirrel jumps out on you, or the rails are rotted. That split second, you could be off that ladder and, in 20 feet down, just really quick. And unfortunately, we see individuals who are quadriplegics who, break their back as a result of that, or maybe have a head injury. And, it's sad to see what can happen when folks don't do those precautions. So it's like I said, I can't stress enough to, before season starts, to really check your stands out, get in there, sweep them out, kill the wasps, check all the the ladder and the rails and all that good stuff. Because again, you're talking about being way up in a tree, and it just, things can happen so quickly. Even the most experienced hunters can experience that without doing the necessary precautions, in my opinion.
So I got up to the Mississippi Delta last Thursday. It was still cold. It was starting to warm up, but it was still very cool. It'd been super cold in the morning, had a frost in the morning. And I went to one of the farms and did some work there most of the day. And then when I got done, I had a big office chair that I wanted to go to another farm to put an office chair in a shooting house. So I did. No wasps. I looked at it, went in, looked, no wasps. I couldn't see anything. So the next day, Jordan and Travis Dunn and I went back to that same stand again. So we were going to check to see if it had room for a second chair. And there were wasps all over the place. And so Travis was about halfway up the ladder, and then suddenly there were just wasps everywhere. So essentially they were dormant, then it warmed back up again.
That's right. Yeah.
And they were there again. So you can't assume that there are no wasps, especially when it's cold. But you can see, man, as soon as they started swirling, his number one reaction was to get down from that ladder.
Right. Yeah.
And you can understand how quickly something could go to heck. One other point, Travis, when he hunted the next morning with his son, I was with one son, he was with the other. He's got twin boys. He said he was up in the shooting house getting ready to leave, put his gun on his shoulder, and the door was open. He started to lose his balance. And it hit him. I mean, he caught himself, but he almost fell out the door. Okay.
Yeah, that's one. Yeah, that's another thing we stress. Using the ropes. Using those tow ropes to lower your gun, and we carry a backpack. With all of our supplies and snacks in it too, because we tend to hang up there a while. But it's so important that a lot of times, and I've done it before too, and I try not to. But sometimes you put your gun on your back in your backpack and you climb up that ladder, but we stress the 3 points of contact, always making sure, 2 arms, 2 legs, make sure at least at all times you got at least 3 of the 4 touching that ladder when you're climbing up. So, having a tow rope in my opinion is extremely important as well, because, we tend to put a lot of stuff in our backpacks, range finders, binoculars, snacks, knives, whatever, and to tow those as well as the gun. But when you tow that gun, it's kind of like what you mentioned earlier, making sure that gun's unloaded and the safety's on. Because again, there are so many things that can happen. And, hunting is such a great thing we have in Mississippi, but unfortunately one wrong move could really, really change someone's life.
People can drop their guard. Coming back to unloaded guns, some guys will finish the hunt. They will keep bullets in the gun, but not one in the chamber. Okay. Mm-hmm. See, that's a sloppy practice in and of itself, because you got to remember to take that bullet out that you've already chambered. You got to remember to take it out and bury it in the cartridge. Friend of mine, same scenario, very experienced hunter, put his gun in the back of his truck. It shifted. It went off and blew a hole in the side of his truck. Golly,
that's scary.
Experienced hunters now. These are guys that are on top of their game usually, but it's usually not the novice hunter that's having the accident. It's the inexperienced hunter. It's the experienced hunter that has taken something for granted. So, what advice do you have to people to never drop your guard?
I would say treat every hunt like it's your first hunt. Check your backpack, make sure you got all your supplies in there. Check the gun, make sure it's unloaded, make sure you got your tow rope, make sure you've done what you needed to in the early fall on your stands to make sure they're all in good working order. And let somebody know where you're hunting. The camp I hunt, we pull the washers that have the tree stand number and put it by our name so everybody knows where you're hunting. But if you're on private land, let your significant other, or your kids or a friend or whoever know where you're going, because I've heard instances of where, people had harnesses on and the bottom of the climbing stand hit the ground and they were suspended in the air on a harness. And, to let people know where you are, I think is just as important as also making sure you've got your gun unloaded and, your stands is in good working condition.
It's really unfortunate these things happen. but if we stay focused, we can reduce the number. Hey, let's remind people what the Mississippi Department of Rehabilitation Services is all about.
Yeah, I'll be glad to. The Department of Rehab Services, we're a state agency. We've got offices all around the state, from Corinth all the way down to Gulfport, so over to Natchez and across the Meridian. So we cover the entire state, but we assist individuals with disabilities in a number of programs. So the big ones are our vocational programs, where we help individuals with disabilities prepare for and obtain full-time employment. So, whatever that person needs to overcome that, or to work through that disability, so to speak, and be ready for a great job, we help with that. We also help what we call special disability programs, where we're helping individuals live at home who are basically nursing home eligible. But we can provide personal care attendant services and home modifications to help individuals live at home with their families, as opposed to a nursing home. And then we also do the spinal cord and head injury trust fund. And that's really where what we're talking about today, that's where this program comes from. But trying to educate folks around the state on the possibility of head injuries and spinal cord injuries. We're talking about hunting today, but you look at concussions in football, car accidents, ATV accidents, diving accidents. We see some diving accidents where people are diving in water and not really knowing how deep it is, or log floats by as they dive in. So Mississippi is such a great state where really you could be outside 12 months out of the year if you wanted to, either swimming or hunting, between the months. But there are so many things that could happen, unfortunately. And through our trust fund, we try to educate folks as well as assist those that need our help.
Chris Howard from the Mississippi Department of Rehabilitation Services. Thanks for spending some time with me. I appreciate you, my friend.
Yes, sir, Rick. I always appreciate being on your show, man. Have a good one.
It is good. Hey, when we come back, we're going to talk to the Small Game Program Coordinator, Rick Hamrick, and I always enjoy catching up with him. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors, where we're celebrating the capital of the outdoors in America, Mississippi, and from the Foundation Studio right here on Biloxi's Back Bay. I enjoyed that conversation with Chris Howard. He has such an important message about safety, and it's like we say over and over again, it's easy to drop your guard when you're in the outdoors, take it for granted, but don't take it for granted. It could be your life or the life of a loved one that is at risk. So please always put safety first. Now let's shift gears and move over to my friend Rick Hamrick, who is the Small Game Program Coordinator, someone who's been on the show several times and I enjoyed checking in with. How you doing, Rick?
Good, Ricky. Good to be back with you.
It's good to see you. Hey, so let's remind people what the Small Game Program is all about.
Yeah, the Small Game Program with the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. We typically kind of focus on squirrels, rabbits, and quail. Kind of those are our species of focus there, and so do everything from kind of looking at harvest management, keeping tabs on that best we can, habitat management on our public lands, and also working with private landowners as well that may need some technical guidance with habitat population management type things there. That's sort of what we're doing in Small Game, sort of on a day-to-day basis there.
Hey, so Rick, when you're in the outdoors this time of year, do you do deer hunting as well yourself personally?
I do deer hunt a little bit. It's maybe not quite as high up on my area of interest, but I do deer hunt, yes.
So what do you do this time of year?
This time of year, I like to go squirrel hunting. It's finally gotten a little bit of weather for it there. Did just a little bit this past weekend, but at least got out. Didn't hunt very hard, but I did get out and got to enjoy it. Saw a lot of squirrels. Just a lot of them seem to be on the ground or kind of a little skittish there where I was, but it was a good morning out, and so that's kind of what I enjoy, getting out and doing, and also maybe looking forward to a little bird hunting later in the year.
That's cool. Listen, you think about the quail and squirrels and rabbits. When you think about the drought that we've been dealing with, what kind of impact is that having on the small game population?
Yes, I think it's probably kind of like a lot of things. It's maybe a little bit of a ripple effect there. And some of this may not actually show up until next year with some stuff, as far as kind of influence and things like reproduction. The vegetation quality that we see right now has kind of declined. And so some of that may kind of show up next year as lower body condition, some of the reserves kind of going through winter. Maybe if they're not able to kind of build some of that up, that can affect them going into the breeding season next spring and summer. There's kind of some lag effects that away, and so some of it may not really be obvious till next year. Probably one of the first things you'd see with squirrels right now, is just that mass crop. From kind of maybe some weird spring weather to the drier weather now. Some of those places where you might usually have acorns may not be there this year, and so that may be one of the most obvious things you'd see kind of from a squirrel standpoint, was just maybe kind of where they are, finding what those food resources they are using and what's available to them. And so it's potentially going to be kind of tough on some things, maybe going into the winter, but time will kind of tell, maybe how hard the winter is, cold weather wise, how some of those might actually affect them. So, a lot of those seed and kind of vegetation quality resources may be really affected by this dry weather.
What's interesting is that on the farms that I have the opportunity to hunt on, the acorn crop seems to be pretty healthy, and since there's the bottoms don't have water, at least most of them don't have water, it's really changed the pattern of the deer. Deer are able to get into places they normally don't get into. I would assume that's also true for rabbits and squirrels, that it might actually spread them out some and make hunts a little bit more challenging. Have you heard that before?
It could, yes. I mean, and in addition to the maybe not finding them in some places where you would, that also could play into a role in it. Yeah, if you've got things that are more accessible to animals, it could spread them out further, not concentrate them as much. And so, it's going to be highly variable, throughout the state probably. There's some areas that are still in pretty good shape, but in a lot of other areas have had it pretty hard as far as the mass crop.
Hey, Rick, isn't it amazing that we're already moving rapidly like a locomotive toward the end of 2023? I mean, this year went by so quick. I know it's been a busy year for you guys, but when you look back, you feel good about the kind of year you've had in the small game program?
Looking back, yeah, it's been pretty good this year. There's been some positive things going. We're still kind of building on some things there. We're working with some national entities on some things, trying to kind of scale up some of our habitat management delivery, especially on private lands. There's lots of positive things there with some of the grant programs we've been able to get as far as doing things like prescribed burning. You may have heard of the Fire on the 40 initiative. That was really kind of beefed up this year. Our private lands program is kind of taking the reins on there. And so, but of course, that's going to have positive impacts on quail habitat, rabbit habitat potentially. And so, overall, yeah, there's been some positive things really kind of coming on this year.
One of the things that we talked about, I think the last time we were together, is about the quail work that you guys have been doing, the survey that you've been doing. Did you find people participating?
We do. We did that last year. This particular one that we're kind of talking about right now is one of our harvest surveys, and it's kind of associated with the research project we're doing. It's kind of focused on 5 wildlife management areas where we're doing some kind of population counting work associated with the habitat management work they're doing on the WMAs, and we are trying to get some quail hunters to just give us some feedback on some of the hunting characteristics they've got there on those WMAs if they go hunt some of those areas, just to kind of let us know maybe, how many they harvest, how many they find. We collect some of that in our daily use permit, but some other things as far as getting a little more specific on kind of the effort they spend, number of hunters, number of dogs they're using, various things that kind of give us a little more information on just the kind of the effort they expend on hunting. And then kind of looking at that with that research project, kind of tying some of that back, just their their views of their hunt, their hunt quality, how they perceive the hunt quality. Kind of tying some of that back to the actual population and habitat things that we're kind of looking at with the research project as well. Just kind of a little side project with that more population oriented work, but yeah, we're trying to kind of get a little more information from hunters and just sort of feedback a little bit on that. And I said we're doing that for 5 wildlife management areas in the research project, but we also have some other options that we're working on, some online types of options if folks want to do that. And we'll get some more information about that coming out pretty soon. We're working up those products right now as we speak, and so we actually have included some other wildlife management areas in those digital versions there that if folks would like to just kind of give us some feedback on their hunt experience and quality there on some of those other areas, we've got that as well. And so we will only have kind of the paper cards at the 5 areas that we're sort of looking at with our research project, but a lot of folks kind of want that digital option anyway, and kind of had that interest expressed last year. And so we've tried to kind of develop some additional options for folks to kind of do that digitally now, since most people have the ability and desire to do it kind of on their phone real time there. So we may have some other options hopefully coming up here pretty soon that we can get some more information about that.
So someone, let's just say someone's got a larger tract of land, and it's a tract that will accommodate coveys of quail, and they're walking along and they encounter a covey of quail. Do you want them to let you know where that is and what they saw? Talk about that a little. Actually, are we getting to the end of that segment, Kyle? I think we may be getting to the end of this segment. We got about a minute and 15 seconds left. Do you want to know about situations like that?
Oh, well, there is an option to do that as well. We had the Scapes app that we talked about kind of back in the springtime, and so that's another little app there that we can probably get some information on our website there to provide that if you would like to do that. But certainly I don't mind folks just reaching out. My email address is on our webpage and the Quail Program site there. If you want to call into the office and have that information relayed, I'm perfectly willing to have those reports. I mean, it's good to know, kind of where folks are finding birds, what they're seeing. Just, a lot of folks get excited about, they see a covey of quail or something. They hadn't seen them there in years, and people usually send in kind of an excited thing. That's good to hear. So yeah, I don't mind hearing about that.
When we get back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Rick Hamrick from the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks Small Game Program. See you after this. Welcome back to SuperTalk Outdoors. I have my friend Rick Hamrick, who's the head of the Small Game Program for the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks. And, it's interesting, Rick. I love spending time with Chris Howard, who we had at the beginning of the show, because he's from the Mississippi Department of Rehabilitation Services. Unfortunately, their organization within the state has had too much experience with hunters who have had accidents, whether it be spinal cord injuries or head injuries. And it's because people drop their guard. You've been with the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks for a long time. Safety, no matter what program you're involved in, no matter what you do, safety always is integrated into your message, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's just no different on our end either. I mean, as far as, you don't think about, you're not climbing trees and that kind of thing from a small game hunting standpoint, but certainly there's a lot of things to be mindful of on safety. First and foremost, firearms. Anytime you're using firearms, you've got to have safety as a first goal there, and so that's certainly something we preach in a lot of the programs, the youth hunting things we do, and that's going to be one of the big things we really preach there. But certainly we know when you're talking about multiple people and something like small game hunting, and if you're hunting squirrels with dogs or rabbits, even quail hunting, that tends to be multiple hunters a lot of times that will be kind of in the same area. And so obviously being aware of your target, not shooting things too low. You've got dogs involved, that's obviously don't want to injure a dog. And so just being mindful of your shooting and, wearing that orange, and if you're bird hunting or rabbit hunting, certainly. It's a good idea squirrel hunting. I mean, during the deer gun season, At least while you're walking around, it's not a bad idea to wear some orange there. It's not required for squirrel hunting, but it's not a bad idea. Just maybe as you're moving around, not actively hunting, to just be mindful of some of those safety things.
So, Chris, excuse me, Chris. Chris was at the beginning of the show, but Rick, you think about duck hunting habitat. One of the biggest contributors to duck season in lots of areas across the Mississippi Flyway is because there's not as much duck habitat as there used to be, and the same thing is true for quail, isn't it?
In a lot of ways, obviously it's a different animal, but a kind of similar problem. Definitely don't have the same types of habitat that we did, 20, 30, 50, 100 years ago. It's just progressively changed over the years. A lot of that's been real subtle. So a lot of folks maybe don't realize quite, how much things change over time, because it just sort of just gradually happens. That may still be a lot of rural land out there that's, it's not got a lot of development built up on it or anything. Obviously that's happened in some areas, but a lot of Mississippi is still rural. But the way we use land is very different, compared to 50 and 100 years ago. Farming's a very different thing right now. It's farming's a business. It's to stay, profitable, operational. They've adopted technologies that have allowed better yield and management of farms, but that's also affected some of the wildlife benefits, quail particularly, just the way that farmland's used. That's not to make anybody out to be a bad guy. Again, it's just his business, the way they're using land. But even our forest management practices are a little different. It's good, folks are embracing prescribed fire a little more. We've come a long way from kind of the anti-fire campaigns. Now folks are kind of distinguishing wildfire from prescribed fire as a land management tool, and so that's been a good thing. But obviously, fire is not a part of the landscape that it used to be, and so it definitely has had an effect on habitat as far as quail are concerned, especially.
Hey, so as you guys are getting ready for 2024, it's amazing that we'll be shifting gears into 2024. Do you continue the programs that you have in 2023, or do you launch new programs? So what's your planning process look like for the new year?
Oh, we always kind of take a look at the new year. A lot of things are going to be kind of copy and paste a little bit. A lot of the things we kind of do from year to year, there's just some things that are just always going to just kind of keep going. It's just, you don't really stop, but we'll have some different things coming up. Would like to hopefully try to work with some partners a little bit more on some introductory type activities for new hunters. We'll be getting back into some workshops with habitat management. I know we've got that kind of planning coming up here pretty soon, that we'll be kind of getting back into doing some workshops that were sort of slowed up back during pandemic times, but we'll get kind of back into some of that. So that'll be kind of a little bit of a reboot on some of that there. And got some different things coming up this year, but we'll have to work on, but a lot of it's going to be some of the same things we've been doing. Yeah.
Well, Rick, I really appreciate you spending some time with me this morning or this afternoon. It's been a pleasure to spend time with you. Small game program for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, Parks is really important. A lot of people, some people, they love it, and that's what they do their entire lives. Some of it's a great introduction to hunting in general. And so it's always good to check in with you. And as we said at the beginning of the show, listen, if there's an underlying theme for this show, it is definitely about always keep safety first. Always keep safety first. Have a great week in the outdoors. We will see you next week. God bless you.